Jacobs. Today is September 10th. We're starting to record this podcast just having heard that Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA has been shot, and the video that I've seen looks horrible. And if he survives this, it will be a miracle. Charlie Kirk was bringing truth and debate and ideas to the public realm, and this is just not acceptable either to the left-wing woke fascists who are taking over the Democratic Party, or to their allies, the Qatari-based jihadists who are together, and those together are all set and ready to pounce on Western civilization. We believe that this attempted assassination, or God forbid, the assassination on one of the bravest of American patriots, a friend to Jews in Israel, may change the political situation here right in America. I would suggest everybody who is watching this, by the time you get this, the truth will be known about his condition. So we'll just proceed. Okay. Hello and welcome to Betrayal, a podcast about the very dangerous situation we Jews in America face today, specifically about the failure of Jewish leadership in our time, and about what we must do, having understood that the cavalry is not coming, our house is on fire, the cavalry is not coming, so what are Jews to do? About how we can recover our reputation and our strength and our safety. Today we're having a special guest, someone who suddenly found herself surrounded by enemies of the Jewish people, and who saw pretty early on that the people who were supposed to protect and defend us, the Jewish establishment, the ADL, the federations, the JCRCs, the AJCs, most rabbis, were AWOL, and concluded that I just wrote in the JNS that the cavalry is not coming. And then she fought hard to find ways, as a proud Jew, that she could take effective action. I want to show you a short clip of Kathryn in action at a museum. And you'll see there a fierceness that is exactly what we need to applaud and cultivate and copy. Here you go.
This scene echoes, record. This scene echoes the massacre of my people in Israel a year and a half ago. Where is the reference to my people who were butchered by people wearing that keffiyeh?
I'm very sorry. This is the art. It's a recreation of an artwork that Wafa Bilal did many years ago.
Yes. Where's the reference to the fact that that keffiyeh is worn by people who want to spill my blood?
I'm very sorry that you're really upset. Can we take this out?
No, we cannot. I want to understand why this thing was reinstalled in February after my people were raped, beheaded, butchered, kidnapped, tortured, and continue to be by people wearing that filthy keffiyeh.
Can I please have you lower?
You cannot. I am upset. I will not accept the normalization of the butchering of Jews, and that is what this museum is doing with this installation.
That's not what this installation
Where's the reference that says that bloody room is the blood today of my people?
That's not what this art. That this particular piece is a recreation of a work we did many, many years ago.
I understand that. That's not what that means today, and that is not what that looks like today. Where's the reference to the butchering of my people? I don't see it in this museum.
I'm very sorry. Can we take this out?
Kathryn now writes for the New York Post. We're going to talk to her about that clip. We're going to talk to her about her visit to the ADL workshop, which only got her more convinced that the cavalry is not going to come. Welcome, Kathryn. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you so much, Charles. It is such an honor to be here, to be speaking with you. You who are a legend, you who were always my North Star, and really showed me a way forward in my darkest of days.
Don't make me blush. Okay, so let's tell us about this clip that we just showed. What were you doing there? What was that?
Yeah. So I was visiting Chicago and I decided to go to the museum, contemporary art. I walked in and went through the museum, which is no great shakes, I will add. On the ground floor, there was a display by an artist, I think he might have been Iraqi, that they had resurrected, pulled out of the archives, and reinstalled post October 7th, 2023. And that installation was a room, basically a room recreated. There was in this iteration, there was a keffiyeh in that room that was folded, and there was sort of paint spattered across the room. Now, the original art installation goes back to the Iraqi War, but they had someone in that museum, some curator thought this would be a good time to pull that thing out of the archives, stick it on the ground floor, which is a prominent place to put any art display, and to put a folded keffiyeh there. Now, immediately to any Jew and any decent person walking through that museum, you saw that installation and you thought about the massacre of our people, the fact that we still have hostages, the fact that people wore those filthy keffiyehs when they were raping and beheading and torturing our people. But that is not what I saw in that museum in terms of context. There was absolutely nothing on the wall about the fact that that image, that installation echoes our massacre. And I thought it was such a heinous and offensive omission to not have some context acknowledging what those symbols mean today. And frankly, who knows what the backstory is? Clearly, someone didn't, they didn't choose a Mona Lisa and put it out. They put something out with a keffiyeh. It was a way of elevating and celebrating the keffiyeh if there's absolutely no context saying this filthy thing is worn by people who want to spill Jewish blood. And you can hear that outrage in my voice as I even talk about it now. It is so deeply offensive to me. It is as though they pulled something out of the archives that had, a noose, and said, this has nothing, with an image of God forbid, a Black person, this has nothing to do with people who used to hang African Americans, in America. No, 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 no. I mean, how would people feel gaslit? That was the same feeling and the same outrage that I had when I saw that installation. And so I asked a person who was with me to film, and she did so understandably very reluctantly. And I just felt, and this sort of, we're starting at the end of this story, I've become the sort of person who is willing to take a very public, loud, and ugly stand over these sorts of things. And it was a very long journey for me to become this person. But when
Okay.
Thank you. Please interrupt. I'll just go on and on.
Pause. Okay. So the keffiyeh, which I call the rape scarf.
Yes.
So give us before you go into who is Kathryn and how did she get here, right?
Yeah. Right.
Is there an end to that particular episode? Did they do anything because you yelled at them?
So what happened was I had earlier met with the Chicago Jewish Alliance, which is a fabulous group. I was just in Chicago, and whenever I'm in, you know them, yes.
Yeah,
you work with them?
Yep.
Fabulous. So yeah, I was in Chicago and I always try to meet Zionists wherever I go. And so I had a coffee with someone from that group. And I said, oh, you'll never believe what just happened in your museum. And I sent him the video and he said, we want to talk about this. And he put it up. And I understand there have been discussions at that museum. I don't know what the outcome is.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned them. We're in conversation with them because, as you know, we're forming and reforming a national network of local Jewish activist groups, and they are fantastic. You know what happened in Chicago when the Chicago City Councilor helped us pass a resolution in Chicago against jihad against Africans. And we'll tell that story later. His name is Raymond Lopez. He's a Catholic, brave guy in the Chicago. He's an alderman. I think they called him an alderman. And we got. We'll put the picture up of what we did.
Wow! Tremendous.
We organized, Africans of even Muslim Africans from Mauritania, plus Christian Africans to come, along with African Americans and us. And we had this amazing resolution against the jihad in Africa. That's another story. So,
Incredible.
who is Kathryn Wolf and how did she get here?
I guess you're asking me that question. That's a hard question. Okay. How did I get here? Yeah.
No, who are
Well,
you? Who are you? Who are you?
yeah. Okay. So I'm a mom and I'm a wife, and I live mainly in Miami, but also in Durham, North Carolina. I was a newspaper reporter for nearly 2 decades. That's really where I spent my professional life. Just a newspaper hack. I learned the trade at the Washington Post. I went to work for the St. Petersburg Times, where I was mainly the crime reporter and then general assignment. And I finished out at the Miami Herald, where I was the fashion and style staff writer. And then I took a decade off really to raise my kids in leafy, progressive Durham, North Carolina.
What year did you take off? When were you done with that?
So I left full-time reporting, must have been, let's see, I moved to Durham in like 2010, around 2010.
Okay.
I stopped being a full-time reporter. And I really had just intended at that point, I don't know, I thought maybe I'd write a romance novel, or, I really had, aspirations to build a nice deck. Yeah. Raise my kids.
And then what happened?
Well, then, right. So then in Durham in 2018, well, let me back it up. 2016, I was sitting in a cafe across from a friend of mine who was an MD who'd gone to Duke, a really beautiful woman. And we were just chatting, and all of a sudden she said, "By the way, I understand Duke is divested." And, at the time, like, I had not been to Israel. She divested. I mean, it occurred to me, I said, I think she's talking about Israel. That's how out of it I was. And I said, "You mean Israel?" "Yes." I said, "They've divested." And there was something in the way she said it that sent chills down my spine. And I knew instantly, for the first time in my life, really, that I was being questioned as a Jew, that she was looking at me and thinking that somehow it was my responsibility and my burden to answer for Israel and Jews, and that there was something in that question that ascribed some shame to it, that I felt she was looking for some sort of apology for me. And I couldn't even articulate what all that was, but I kind of froze and, sidestepped the question. After that, I started making calls. I didn't know what the Jewish acronyms were. I didn't know, what APEC really was and how it was different from the ADL, or who might be responsible. So I called my JCC, I think there's a problem. So I was just having coffee with a friend who buttonholed me about Israel. Something's out there. Something's in the water here. And I don't know what it is or how widespread it is, but I think might be a problem coming down. And they put me in touch with a couple of people, and really, certainly nothing happened. People were starting to say, we're starting to hear some things. Durham is a very progressive town. It's bookended by UNC Chapel Hill and Duke University. But nothing happened. And so I went on for another 2 years, and I sort of said, well, it's like a dull ache. I'm sure it'll go away. 2018 happened, and I was out of town when I got a call. I started getting texts from people saying the Durham City Council is enacting a boycott against Israel. The Durham City Council. Okay, we have problems with recycling, and some of the schools aren't good. But apparently, the pressing issue now was that, God forbid, Durham police should ever train in Israel around, community policing, which is something Israel has pioneered, or taking out, a terrorist who is holding, a gun to the head of a hostage. God forbid any of our policemen or women should go to Israel and train. They would come back with the intent and the knowledge of how to maim and perhaps murder, people of color. This was
This was a whole campaign in Raleigh-Durham. We had our
thank you.
team, Jewish Leadership Project team in Raleigh-Durham, fought this like hell. They went to this was a whole campaign about how the cops in Raleigh-Durham were being trained by Israelis in Israel to come back and shoot black people. That was the
Thank you.
That was the whole claim. And the story is that our team went to the JCRC, went to the Federation there and said, come to City Council, stop this. They wouldn't do it. And they said, you guys should shut up, you local activists. We know how to handle this. We do it behind the scenes. And same story as you hear in every city in America. And these guys, our guys, just went and did it anyway, told them they were going to go and fight it. And it forced the JCRC to appear. And, but that you got your finger on it. That's what happened. And it's happening all over.
And, that was before I didn't know who any of the players were. I mean, I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And it was but that was the beginning. That was when I started to see that the big guns in the Jewish world were not coming to my defense. And that this sort of thing, these sort of campaigns were going to break relationships between Jews and blacks, between Jews and other brown people. It was clear that this was a poison that they were inserting into our society. And I kept saying, well, who's supposed to show up? What do I know? I haven't even been to Israel. I don't even know. I'm supposed to do this. How am I going to do? I can't do anything. I'm sure, Jonathan Greenblatt is going to show up for me, or at least his, third in command, or, someone's going to come and save us, right? What do we do? Should I give more money? That was the beginning of when my eyes started to open.
Okay. So you start out, you're outside the Jewish community pretty much. You didn't even know AIPAC from ADL, right?
Well, I wasn't. I mean, I was always, we always belonged to a shul, to be clear, but I was never, activist. I still don't consider myself an activist.
All of these people who were supposed to be leading us, they kind of missed this tectonic shift in American life and neglected to educate you and us about what was coming our way. And they kept clinging to the left, and we're going to be friends with the left. And it was those people who stabbed us in the back on October 8th. So you come from, I can't do anything, to maybe the cavalry is coming. Maybe I should throw them a couple of dollars. And then what happened?
Well, I mean, it gets worse. There's two things. One is that I have a horrible, lifelong, incapacitating fear of public speaking.
Never would know that.
I got past it.
So the jihad saved you. It transformed you into a lucid, eloquent, passionate spokesperson.
Rage will do that to you. Rage will get you past that fear. And so the other thing was, it gets worse, actually, Charles, because I was still under the delusion that I just had to tell the right people, and then they were going to come and fix everything. So I was like, I signed up, for the AIPAC conference in DC, and I went, and I made little cards, saying like, fight back now or something, and I went to all the big guns were there, and I met with every, someone from every big organization, giving them my card saying, we've got a problem in Durham. We've got such a bad problem, and I think this is the canary in the coal. When are you coming? When are you going to push back? When are you going to speak for us? And finally, by the end, I was literally in tears. They were not coming. They were not ever going to come. And when I started getting lectured about, why don't you just go explain it to your neighbors that Israel makes great tomatoes? I thought, wow, are we in trouble?
And then what? Wow, are we in trouble? And then what?
And then I went back to writing. And then I started. So I wrote a piece for Tablet Magazine. Out of that visit, out of looking for someone to help us and not finding anyone, I wrote a piece in Tablet Magazine, and they called it "The Screamers."
Right.
Yeah.
It's good.
And so, yeah, it's true. And so, and that really, was pivotal for me personally, because instead of just being like, one of like three people in Durham who were outraged. And I was certainly like literally like crying on my bathroom floor at night going like, this is so dark and this is so terrifying. And what's going to happen? I went to like, oh, there are other people. There are people like Charles Jacobs out there. There are people who are leading the way, who have alternatives, who see a way forward, and it's not the typical establishment route. There are other aggrieved people who are starting to see this darkness on the horizon. So that changed my life, I guess. And then I wrote it, and then then what? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I started to see anti-Zionism and ambivalence to Zionism in my synagogue, in my Reformed synagogue in Durham, which was the largest Reformed synagogue, I think, in the state. And so I started pushing back in that arena. And I started seeing the problem with DEI and anti-Zionism in my kids' prep school. And that was a hard one. I had to push back in that area too. And at the JCC, I'd walk through the JCC with petitions, saying that the federations should not be platforming the Durham mayor who spearheaded the boycott against Israel. And I would take my petition, I'd go up to people, and I'm scared. I'm like shaking, and I'm like sort of, I feel. It's a hard thing to do, to put yourself in a position where, you're going to be scoffed at and you're going to be.
The hardest thing is the Jews who understand that their protectors have failed them. Many, many Jews don't want to have open fights with them because, this is the rabbi whose political stuff I hate, but he did my son's bar mitzvah, or he came to me when my mother died, or the head of the federation could be sitting next to me in shul. How can I have these fights? Shalom bias. This is what many of us feel. The Jewish leftists don't care about this because they slime us all over the place, right? But our side has this problem of openly revolting and criticizing. I know of friends who believe everything I believe except that let's not have this fight, right? So it's difficult. So the fact that you went in there and you push them publicly to do things they wouldn't do makes you pretty special.
Oh, or dumb. I don't know. It took me a long time to make peace with being someone who was persona non grata everywhere. That is a hard, I went to college, I got good jobs. I was part of, part of the respected mainstream newspaper world. I had my kids in prep school. I have never been, like a rebel type or, stick it to the man or against authority. I'm like someone who, just kind of likes to, make friends and I like to be liked, or I should say I was that person. The outrage was so deep for me. The betrayal of this country, of society, I grew up in a really progressive town called Columbia, Maryland. And the betrayal to me personally from fellow progressives cut me so deeply. And understanding the sweep of history, of Jew hatred, of our persecution over the millennia, and seeing that it was right here in front of me. It was not dead. It was not gone. It was just under the surface all the time. And I just didn't know it. When you're dealing with those sorts of reckonings, personal reckonings, you stop caring whether you get invited to a party or a break fast, or people talk about you when you go into a room, or if, the whole world thinks you're wrong or a jackass. You just stop caring. And it is painful, I found personally, to separate Barry Weiss talks about letting go of the mantle of respectability. She talks about sending your kids to, don't try to get into the star colleges, just break that. And personally, in my own life, I really came to terms with not being liked, not being appreciated, being cast as, Republican or conservative, or, even worse. But that, I really get it when people don't want to speak out because they don't want that baggage. I really understand.
Yeah, I understand too, but we're at war, and people are going to more and more who go like you, the better off we are, because you don't have to spend your whole life criticizing the people who failed. We're building a movement to bypass them, right? What we've got to do is understand that they're not going to come for us to help us,
Yeah.
and then we've got to. What do we do? Now there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Jewish people in America who are concerned, if not afraid, of what's happening, and they want to act. They don't know what to do. They need leadership and guidance, and that's what we're doing. And I'm so glad that you're on our team. And so now tell me, you've been writing for a bigger paper even recently.
Oh, the New York Post? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Right. So I've started writing opinion pieces mainly for the New York Post about Jewish issues, about how our Jewish leadership has failed us, how they've been ensconced in this, leftist echo chamber where they would not tolerate dissent. Well, their so-called big tent is about this big, because they don't want to hear opposing viewpoints about the most basic things. And these groups, they came up at a time when society was different for America, and it's just a shame that they didn't that they didn't listen to the Charles Jacobs of the world, who were telling them that the world is changing.
Well, they were leaders for peacetime, right? Kumbaya, nice. Let's be nice to everybody. Let's get a main seat at the victim table because we're the historic classic victims, even though we're not suffering right now. So we want to have all these wonderful relationships with the other people who are victims, blacks and transgenders and feminists and Latinos and even Muslims. And so will be our mantle, and that will protect us because we're on the virtuous side of things. And they failed to see that we got kicked off of that table and replaced by the Muslims. And now we're white oppressors. So if you know that, you don't, and you're highly paid, and there are very many of these people who get an awful lot of money. The Jewish treasury is, they don't want to fight. They're conflict averse. They're peacetime people. They're kumbaya guys. And they just cling and cling and cling and hope that this will happen and make allies of the people who on October 8th stabbed us in the back. I have to tell you, the millions, if $500 million that we sent to the Jewish leadership, if they would have taken that $500 million and gone up to the Empire State Building and threw it off, that would have been better than them giving it to our enemies. If they'd have burned it, that would have been better than giving it to our enemies. So now, can I ask you if you're willing to talk about a certain workshop that you went to at the ADL?
I go to a lot of those. Okay. I think you mean the one in Boston.
Okay, so you're our inside eyes to what's actually happening inside the ADL, who everybody hopes is going to change. And it's true, Jonathan has said better things than he's ever said before, but he's got a staff, and staff is policy, and those are all woke kids. He's going to have they'll have a Barry Weiss type of revolt against him on the inside, right? 2, he doesn't want to lose his left-wing donors, right? 3, from what I can tell, and you're going to give us the data on this, they don't want to talk about the biggest threats to Jewish life: Islamic anti-Semitism and woke progressive Islamic anti-Semitism and the Red-Green Alliance. So he won't talk about that. So he just wants to talk about the right. And of course, there's a problem on the right. Let him take care of that. That's good. But that's not, there are no Nazi professors on college campuses or, the threat has come from the left Muslim alliance. So you went into the ADL workshops. Was this before or after October 7th?
I go in before and after.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the before and a little bit about the after.
The before was, their big conferences were, they recognized that there was a problem, and sometimes they would touch on lightly, certainly, anti-Semitism on the left, much more anti-Semitism on the right. But the ADL always, they have this thing where they're the tough guys, right? They're the guys, they're the big guns, they're the ones who, they're the experts in anti-Semitism and all that. The ADL just wants to get along. They want to play nice. And I mean, I talk about my own personal journey about, coming to terms with not being liked. The ADL cannot come to terms with not being liked. That is the biggest problem. They don't want to say the most inconvenient things because they like being, slapped on the back, and they like the handshakes. I mean, it's not putting the money aside. Yikes. Who would they be if they really started talking about Judea, Samaria, and not the West Bank? Who would they, my God forbid anyone say, you know what? We don't believe in a two-state solution anymore. Not going to read about that on the ADL website. These are things that will not get you a dinner, get you to skip the dinner reservation line at the hot restaurant.
They won't take an offensive position. They won't move from, we're not as bad as you say, here, read this history book and you'll see, right? They won't go away from that to colonialists. What, us? We're still a dot in the desert. You guys, the Arabs, you were a dot in the desert. And
100%.
then you conquered by jihad, slaughtering people. And now you got 52 Muslim nations, most of which were done by jihad. They won't do that.
Absolutely. And that's always, you're so right. And you're so brilliant to point that out. 100%. They will not fight hard. They want to be the politest guy in the room. They still want their respect. It's tough to say stuff. It's the truth, and it has to be said. And it's just tragic that people give all their money to the people who are the most mealy mouths and don't have the guts to say it.
Right. And they won't.
And we're not. Yeah.
And they also won't say, listen, we told you to have these allies, kind of made a mistake there. So I mean, nobody wants to admit they made a mistake, especially on such a huge thing, especially after they told you and money and got millions because you were convinced that they were the ones who knew what the hell they were doing. They don't want to say, look, the natural allies of the Jews are also people who believe in American values. They're the conservatives, Republicans, Christians, evangelicals, and they're also other people who are experiencing jihad from around the world. They're the Druze, they're the Copts, they're the Kurds, they're the Hindus, they're the Persians. That would be a nice bowl of allyship, as they say. They don't want to do that. They won't go there.
No, they like to play. They like to pretend they're tough and wring their hands. And so you were asking what what is it like inside one of those workshops? So I went to Boston. This must have been, I think, maybe a year ago, maybe less. I went to Boston to attend a meeting about anti-Semitism in Boston schools, and it was held at the federal courthouse. And it was a panel discussion. I had the top state attorney there. It was shocking. They refused to say the words Zionism, anti-Zionism, jihad. I was so gaslit in there. I was literally gasping out loud. I looked around at all these Boston Brahmins because it was a very high-level meeting in the federal courthouse. It was full of lawyers. It was full of people in very expensive suits. And after all they talked about were Nazis and black racism. And there was a nod to DEI. They put someone up there who was a DEI expert. I stood up afterwards. I felt like I was in a parallel universe. And I said, wow. I started saying, I mean, I didn't pull a scene like I did in the museum, but I said, wow. Does anyone else feel gaslit here? Yay, ADL. This is what the ADL.
This girl who didn't want to be public speaker, stood up in an ADL workshop with the Brahmins around her and all the
At the
fancy
end.
clothes. And then you said, "Hey guys, we're being is that you? We're being gaslit."
Well, at the end, I didn't want to interrupt. I'm not exactly a heckler. I feel like there are sort of boundaries for
I think you've got a hidden
dissent.
heckler. You got a hidden buried heckler in there. It'll come out.
I don't know. I hope not. But no, I did stand up, and I mean, people, they seemed scared to me in Boston. The audience members, like, they kind of like bit their, like they didn't want to say yes, they didn't want to say no. It's like, let's get away from the crazy woman, but they knew I was maybe not crazy. And this is the stuff that makes a person say, God, what the hell what's going on this planet?
Right. Well, these are the people, some of whom are going to find, they're good people. They wanted to fight anti-Semitism. They weren't educated correctly, and they're a little crazy in their, but there's Jewish blood in the streets now. And so those donors, I expect some of them are going to come to us because they're going to see, we want to fight anti-Semitism. They're not doing it. Let's see if we can find something better. So,
To those donors, I would say, the establishment organizations are anachronisms. The sun has set on those groups. Those groups have not been effective for years. And just making Jews look good by putting on a nice suit and shaking the right hands and saying the right things, it ain't cutting it. And now we really see with the damage they have done. If you are giving another dollar to an establishment legacy organization, you are throwing your money away, as Charles says.
You're giving it to your enemies. You're giving it to your enemies.
Well, even more so.
Well, it did anyway. The thing that's interesting is that you explained that they talked about racism against blacks, right?
Yes.
So this was their theory. Their theory was, and it should be true, right? But it didn't work out. It should be true that if Jews stand with blacks, and we did, we have always done it. If anybody out there has read Dumasani Washington, who's on our team, Pastor Washington's books about the contribution of Jews to the Black Civil Rights Movement, even before I didn't even know that Jews were the ones who funded black schools when blacks weren't supposed to go to school in the South.
Rosenwald.
Yeah. Rosenwald, yeah. So it was true to some degree. Well, if some people were nice to me, I'd be nice to them. So therefore, we were nice to them. But they completely missed that so many black people have been over the years. And I saw Stokely Carmichael come on campuses in the 15, 20 years ago. They were being told that Palestinians were dark-colored people and Jews were white, and Jews were rich. So the envy part, human nature is envious. And plus that you're really on the other side because you should be with the liberation movement of the Arabs, even though that liberation movement of the Arabs is enslaving blacks today, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't get, because they never went beyond talking to the top nice black pastors. They never went into the synagogue, into the churches and said, let's have a conversation about what's being told to you about us. They didn't want to do it. Just like Jewish leaders have these dialogues with imams. They never say to the imams, what are you teaching about Jews in your school? Let me see the curriculum. Maybe we can work out something. They never would do it. They're terrified. They won't.
Terrified.
So you caught them exactly at their Achilles heel, their foolishness and their spinelessness. And I'm glad you went in there and you reported that to us. So
but it's more than that too. Charles, I think, it is a failure of historic proportions. Our foothold, our place in America is really an open question. And their failure is such, it shows a lack of historic understanding. The literature, most everybody, many people in the Jewish community read now is, we understand the mutations of anti-Semitism. We understand now why it bubbles up again in any troubled society at any time, and how we are just a blank slate for society's ills. If the Jewish leaders had really grappled with that, they might not have been asleep at the wheel. And it's like you could say, well, yes, but times were good. You know what? These were the guys who were paid to know this stuff. They had one job. They had one job, which was to understand history and to see it coming and protect us. And the failure is historic. So I'm still outraged about where we find ourselves.
So now we have to understand this and pick ourselves up and make a national plan for all those Jews out there who have talents, who have passion, who have some money, who have friends in the world. And we have got to make an alliance, because the anti-Semitism, which is burning down the Jewish house, that house will be kindling to burn down America. We're only the first that they're after. You know, the jihad against the Jews is the first opening shot against Western civilization. And we're seeing that now. And people in Europe now are hopefully in 3 days from now, which is September 13th, there's going to be an immense 500,000, millions of people in London. France is falling. Macron's government is falling. Ireland is in uproar because of the mass migration of unassimilable Muslim populations there, the gang rape stories, the impoverishment of Europe to feed and house and educate these people. So the world we're at a historic moment, and what we Jews have to know how to do now is to learn quickly to get the right allies, to have the right messages, to do the right fights, guided by people who kind of know how to do this. And we can prevail. We can still win, even though the cavalry is not coming. So I want to thank you so much. I don't know how we're gonna entitle this session, "The Transformation of Kathryn Wolf." I don't know, or something.
Painful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So stay in touch with us. We love you.
Thank you, Charles.
God bless. God
You
bless.
are fabulous. I love you too. Thank you for everything you do for
All right.
us.
So let me sign off with the following a little bit.
Should I? Okay.
Yeah, you could stay there. You could stay there.
Or stay.
Kathryn, if you want people to reach out to you, if you do, then you can.
Okay, great. Yeah, you can just text. Okay.
I mean, you can say how people can reach out to you, and if you don't, we can edit this out. This is all editable.
No, that would be great. If people want to contact me, feel free to reach me at Kathryn@kathrynwolf.com, and it's Kathryn at kathrynwolf.com.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, great.
So what I want to say to people is that we are now reformulating and recreating our teams across the country. We're trying to help people who want to do something, either begin to form groups, join already formed groups, or for those groups that are already formed, we are going to network across the country. And we have programs, teaching sessions about how to go on offense rhetorically. We have a new one that's coming out, how to talk to your liberal Jewish cousin, okay? And we want to help you in any way we can. So please join us, jewishleadershipproject.org. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.